I'm Matt Reynolds, and this is my podcast.
I can do the job, but running the business is quite difficult. What a lot of tradesmen lack, and I was probably one of them, is business skills.
I don't mind making mistakes. You learn from your mistakes.
Information is all around you in the minds of people that work beside you.
Welcome back to the Trench Talk podcast. This week I travelled to one of Jerome Beekmans' offices to discuss building his business, of which he is the Australian franchisor, called Mr. Electric. The idea of these discussions, for those of you joining us for the first time, is to go into the trenches of achievement and talk not with people who are orchestrating from some lofty perspective, but to those high performers who are actually in the trenches honing their craft. That has included guests from the worlds of business, sport and entertainment, all of whom are on the front lines doing amazing things. Jerome is a third-generation electrician who's had some great times in the building industry, but he's also had to endure, like many have, some pretty tough times as well. It's a familiar story for those of you who know the trade sector well. You build your business, grow, take on bigger and bigger work until eventually you run into a client who doesn't want to pay you for the work you have completed. For Jerome, that happened in the weeks before he got married. He was forced to reassess his plans and ultimately found his way to the franchise industry, where he is now building a national brand. It's Jerome's vision to make, in his own words, Mr. Electric Australia, the leading residential and commercial electrical services and repair company in Australia. During our chat, we covered work ethic, his views on our education and formal schooling system, introducing Gyms Electrics as part of the bigger Gyms franchise group to Australia, which Jerome did before he began developing Mr. Electric, the importance of knowing your ideal customer, how he has structured their pricing model, growing trades-based businesses, and why working smarter alone is not enough, and why working harder doesn't always guarantee you succeed. To find out more, book a job or contact Jerome, head to mrelectric.com.au. If you enjoy Trench Talk, head to trenchtalkpodcast.com and opt in for the newsletter. We'll make sure you're notified when every episode of the show is released. Enjoy my chat with Jerome Beekmans. Jerome, thanks for doing this.
No problem at all.
We're in your Williamstown office this morning, one of your many offices around the place.
Yep.
Let's just paint the picture for anyone listening, watching at home. You're at a barbecue, you're a couple of beers in, someone you've never met before, and they ask, what do you do? How do you answer that question?
Well, yeah, it is really a good question because, obviously I'm an electrician by trade, similar to yourself being a plumber by trade, but yep. So we basically sell franchises, coach franchisees and help people, be it electricians, plumbers, handyman, whatever, to be coming in the future. But basically, electricians achieve their business goals and financial goals and whatever it is they do by using a franchise system to run their businesses better.
So, is your model? Do you go out there and you look for electricians to help? How do you find your franchisees?
So there's a couple of different ways. We quite often get people looking through search engines, and they'll come to us via things like Seek or basically straight to our website. They may have seen the vans around, or we actively go out and there's a bit of a dirty word, but a bit of telemarketing, talking to electricians around the country to see if they are interested in learning a bit more about us.
Yep.
So there's a lot of different avenues, but you probably need to speak to 100 electricians to get one decent franchisee.
Okay.
And when I say decent, I mean anyone can be decent. It depends how well you are, or how likely you are to follow a system.
Yep.
So there's a lot of people who are interested, but it's when you actually get down to it and get into the nitty gritty of handing over money and all that sort of thing that sorts the men from the boys, so to speak.
So is it the lack of a system, a lack of knowing what to do? Is that why people come and look for you?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. There's a lot of people, especially with franchising, who think that I buy a franchise and all I've got to do then is sit back and wait for the work to roll in and the dollars to roll in and away we go. But I mean, franchising, whether it's a McDonald's franchise or a real estate franchise or whatever, you've still got to put in the hard work. What it does do, it cuts out a lot of the what ifs, and the what ifs might be, where am I going to market? What's our best customers to actively search for? How am I going to recruit? What questions am I going to ask? What does their digital marketing look like? what sort of pricing am I going to use? So there's all these different systems that, whether you're working with Mr. Electric or whether you're working with all these other, franchise models, they're all done and dusted for you. You're not having to reinvent the wheel, basically.
Yep. So you've got all that programmed out, systematized, and then you take people through actually implementing that into their business?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And I think the hardest thing for people to understand is when they actually do make the decision, right, I'm going to become a franchisee, be it with us or somebody else, the hardest thing for them to do is once they get through training, they've got this mind full of information and they don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And that's that there in itself is a challenge because, that is where franchisees or potential franchisees can actually lose the plot, so to speak. But their mind is scattered. They've got this table full of information, and they've got to get it into some sort of order. And that's where we come on with our franchise consulting. We actually say, right, let's start with the first thing.
Yeah.
What's the base here? It's like building a house. What do you need to build a house? Well, you need your foundations. So what are your foundations? Your foundations are your customers.
Yeah.
How are you going to get your customers? Well, you've got to start marketing. Where am I going to market? So then, so you build up this way, but, taking a step off to the side while you're doing that, then you've got to also get your vehicles and your uniforms and all that sort of stuff in order, your general financial systems in order too. So we actually just work with them for the first, 2 to 3 months pretty closely on a, weekly visits or calls or depending on where they are, of course.
Yep.
And then we just go, step by step through the system, and as they grow, we introduce another bit, and it gets to a point where eventually after 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it happens to be, that they rarely need our services at all. So it becomes a self-generating, or key turn system, whatever you want to call it. But it just works
Because they get used to following their system.
Correct. Yeah.
So I want to come back to this model and stuff a little bit later.
Yep.
But for you, electrician by trade.
Yep.
Why you? Why electrical?
Okay, so my grandfather came out from Holland back in the 50s.
Right, okay.
He was an electrician at Philips over there. There's some interesting stories he was telling me during the Second World War when they were invaded by the Nazis and all that sort of thing. So there was a few good stories he was telling me about old ways they used to do things. And anyway, so my grandfather, my father, I've got 2 uncles, I've got a cousin, brother-in-law. Like I think it's nearly in the blood.
Okay, so it's a family. Is it? So you're third generation
Yes.
electrician.
Yep.
Okay. Did he work for himself when he got to Australia?
So he started out working at Avalon Airfield.
Okay. Yep. Not far.
Not far from it, yeah, because we lived in Lara and just next to Avalon.
Yep.
So started out working at Avalon and then started working for himself. I think in about 1960 or 62 or something like that.
Yeah.
Called the business Beekmans Electrical Services. As everyone does, everyone wants to see their name up in lights.
Of course, yeah.
And then my father didn't want to do that, but was actually naturally good at it. Used to help out on weekends and all that sort of thing where he could. He went in to be a draftsman and then did that for a couple of years and thought, no, this isn't for me, and did an adult apprenticeship with his father. And they basically built the business, to a small, reasonable business, 5 or 6 vans running around and doing a few bigger contracts. And when my grandfather retired, my father just went back just to doing it on his own again.
Right.
And I sort of did the same thing. I started working weekends and cleaning the vehicle and just being interested generally in what was going on. But I didn't want to be an electrician. So I went to university to study electronic engineering.
Okay.
And that lasted about 6 months. So I couldn't see myself doing that.
Wasn't for you?
Wasn't for me, no. So much to my father's disgust, I said, listen, I want to become an electrician. Not his disgust, I shouldn't say that, because I think he was quite happy. But then him and I worked together for probably 5 or 6 years before we started growing the business, Beekmans Electrical Services. But my apprenticeship was spent under floors of homes and in roofs and rewiring houses and all that sort of thing.
As many apprentices spend their time.
Exactly. So it was good, and then we built up a business we got into large construction work and went from myself and my father through to 6 blokes and then 10 and then all the way up to sort of 40, 45 people.
Yeah.
We had an estimator and girls in the office and project managers and all sorts of things. And
when you've got people working off site, for those not in the trade business, that's a fairly substantial operation, isn't it? 45.
Yeah, it is.
people.
It is, and it comes with its own troubles on a daily basis. And one of the biggest things, obviously, being in the construction industry, is the volatility of the builders that you're working for, and the ruthlessness of their project managers. So we ended up struggling to cope with that because we didn't have the money to fight these people in court when they didn't pay us and all this sort of thing. And as it turned out, we weren't making any more money with 45 blokes than we were with 5 blokes. So,
which is a very common story.
Yeah, it is. Less time to ourselves, more stress, and it's just one of those things. So, as it turned out, unfortunately, the business didn't survive.
Yep.
And we had 2 of the major building companies that I won't mention. They basically did us over for variations on projects that were, 80% of the value of the original job, and one was nearly 120% more than the original job in variations. So deciding not to pay, and then that goes down the line because we had guys that missed out on entitlements and local contractors that we couldn't pay because the builder didn't pay us. And I had one guy fly down from Sydney, meet me at the airport. He looked at me and said, "This is what we're going to pay you. If you don't like that, I'll see you in court in 3 years." And he closed his book over and got up and walked back and jumped on a plane back to Queensland.
And that was it.
That was it. So I went back and saw my lawyer, and the lawyer just said, nothing you can do.
Yeah, okay.
Just that's the end of it. Move on.
So this is a very common story on varying levels within trade, right? You quote on a job. Let's just talk through that. You quote on a job, and then they change the job that you've quoted on, and that's where all the discrepancies come in.
Correct, yeah.
In your variations, you're trying to recover the costs of the changes.
Absolutely, yeah.
In the job, yeah. Okay. Is it still like that today? Because that's going back a little bit in time.
That's going back to the early 90s. So, early to mid 90s. And to be honest, I haven't been in that construction industry because that was the last straw. I said I'm never going back.
Oh, and then you got out completely.
We got out of construction altogether. So, we didn't know what we were going to do, and we spoke about a few different things, and we went back to just a few blokes, just doing basically back to residential stuff and a little light commercial work. But whether it goes on or not now, I'm not up to date with that because I'm just not interested. But there was clauses in the contracts that you signed that said if you're given instruction to go ahead, you must go ahead. But then later in the contract, there's another clause that says you must wait until you get approval to go ahead before. So there's a bit of
burying you in the details, and I suppose a bigger organisation, as again can be common in or under a lot of different circumstances, is it using their power of their size and their understanding of the law to play a longer game than you're able to play.
Correct. And our lawyer said that, at that time, he said, look, they've probably got 3 fat lawyers sitting up there just looking at you as a number, and they just say, you can do this, 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 and this. They'll be dealing directly with their project directors who will deal with the project managers, and they don't care. So you're just a number.
if we can go into it just a little bit more, there's obviously a moment where you knew that was you were done, right?
Yep.
When did you realise that point?
That was the week before my wedding.
Okay.
So that was an interesting time. No, I think it was actually a little bit earlier but I think it finally dawned on me, back before I got married. So, but yeah, once we got over I suppose the shock of what had happened.
Yep.
I had a conversation with my father, and we spoke about a few different bits and pieces and different directions to take and what we should do. And we still had a little bit of work flowing in from customers because we've been around since my grandfather's day.
Yep.
So we sort of just started doing that. We still had material left over from jobs and all that, vehicles and all that sort of thing. So we weren't, starting from scratch again. But basically, we just sort of, we for want of a better term, flopped along for a year or so to figure out what we were going to do. We always spoke about being the gyms of electrical. How could we do that? How could we have all these vans running around without too many hassles? So, and that's that rolls us into the next phase, which was we actually approached gyms themselves about doing electrical work.
Okay, so the franchise group,
gyms,
famously Gyms Mowing,
Yeah. So we got together with those guys and we did quite a bit of work with them on how it would work and what we do and creating manuals and all that sort of thing. And they were happy for us to get going. So we kicked off there in the late 90s, I think it was. Around late 90s, 2000, somewhere around there.
So you would have bought like a master franchise or license for the electrical sector in Australia, Victoria?
No, Australia.
Australia, okay.
Australia, yeah. So they didn't really have anyone, knocking down their doors to do it.
And that was an era where they were rolling out a lot of new trades and bringing, I guess, new trades into their own portfolio, right?
Yeah.
So that was in that through that sort of era.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So, they're obviously their bread and butter was their mowing.
Yep.
And I think that was, when it comes to licensed trades, and Jim did warn me about this. He said, look, you're going to find it harder to sell a licensed trade because you haven't got a market like we have in mowing.
Yes.
You've got this, anyone can, respectfully, anyone can mow a lawn.
Yes.
And, do all that sort of thing if they're trained correctly.
Yep.
Not anyone can be an electrician. So all of a sudden you've got, a market of 1 million people down to a market of maybe 100,000 at best.
Yep.
But look, it went off all right, and we had a couple of guys going, a couple of franchisees going, and all that sort of thing. And we just found, and this is no disrespect to Jim's at all, because I think they have a fantastic system. He's sort of led the way in franchising, throughout the country, really, Jim himself.
Across the board of everything.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
he has.
Sure.
So, and he's got a good group of people behind him. They've had their issues. I mean, every franchise group has their issues. But the battle we had was, A, people not knowing whether you're licensed or not, because you're a Jim's guy. And the other one was, you can get your lawn mowed for, at that time, $20. You get the nature strip done for $5 or, So here we are rocking up in the van trying to charge, $150 to $250 for a job that we would charge maybe $500 for now.
Yep.
And people were not expecting that. They were expecting things to be done for $30 or $40 or $50. And I think that in itself is a challenge. So, we stayed with them for, I think it was 8 years, but then we had our challenges, and but they were a good group to work with.
Okay,
really good group. So
then, obviously you left Jim's at some point. So
yeah, we did. So I was actually, while I was with Jim's, I was visiting friends of ours. I got some friends in America, and I was driving down the coast of California, and I saw this van, Mr. Electric.
Yeah.
So I thought, that's a pretty cool name. I'll remember that one. And we actually flew across the other side of the country to our friends in Atlanta. And, that's like, I don't know, from Perth to Melbourne, for example.
Other sides of the US,
yeah. So for those who don't know.
Yeah, of course.
So anyway, so driving around the city in Atlanta, and here's another Mr. Electric van, exactly the same wrap and everything like that. And I thought, that's too coincidental, to look the same and same. Anyway, I came back home, and I didn't Google it at the time because I don't think Google was around, but it was Yahoo or something. I'm not sure. One of those search engines. Just had a look and actually found out that it was a franchise, and I actually called them and spoke to the president of Mr. Electric at the time, and they just signed it over to TXU Energy, which is. TXU became True Energy. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember True Energy at all. They were just a...
Yeah, I do. No, I remember the ads of TXU and the TX-Who.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. So then, they kept that and kept...
So they signed over the name to them?
No, they signed the master license for Mr. Electric to True Energy.
Right, okay.
And as it turned out, that only lasted a couple of years for them, because the guys who were running True Energy at the time changed the name to True Energy Electricians, and they didn't really, there wasn't a passion to sell anything, because it's a massive company, and I think in 2 or 3 years they sold 2 franchises or something like that. So,
so they didn't bring the Mr. Electric name to Australia?
No, they bought the system.
Okay,
and
without the name.
Change the name.
And change the name, got it. Okay,
yeah. So, it was True Energy Electricians, a Mr. Electric service.
Okay.
So, how that worked out at the time with Mr. Electric and them, I don't know what that looked like. But anyway, so as it turned out, it didn't work for them. They were bought out by Singapore Light and Power or China Light and Power, one of the two, and they were told to dump it. So, I just happened to be at the right place at the right time, and I knew the guy who was running it, and they said, we're getting rid of this Mr. Electric business. I said, oh, that's interesting. I'll give them a call. And 2 months later, I was sitting in their offices in Texas, and we signed on to Mr. Electric. So
To bring the Mr. Electric name, franchise, system, model back to Australia. So what year are we talking?
that was 2008.
Okay.
Now I know there's a few years in between the gyms thing and all this. In between that time, we were just doing what we do. Same sort of. We left gyms and did our own,
Own stuff. Yeah.
Own stuff. So there's a lot of changes and what ifs and going on at this time. But once we had that Mr. Electric system, we started dealing with them on a daily basis initially, but then weekly and then monthly. We just found them to be such a good company to work for, and Mr. Electric are owned by a company called the Dwyer Group in the US.
Yep.
They, for want of a better word, are gyms on steroids.
Yeah. I wanted to ask about this. Can you give us a sense of sort of the size of that operation and how Mr. Electric, if I understand it correctly, fits into their model?
Yeah. So Mr. Electric is one of 14 different concepts that they have, and they call them concepts, not brands.
Okay. And is it owned by Dwyer Group?
It's owned by the Dwyer Group. And the Dwyer Group in itself turns over in the vicinity of $1.5 billion a year as a group.
Yeah. So it's a fairly substantial sort of operation.
Yeah, it is a fairly substantial operation. They're in, I think, about 15 or 16 countries around the world, 2,000 to 3,000 franchisees. I couldn't even hesitate to guess at how many vans that they would have in the different concepts around the world, and they're really expanding quickly to buy brands that suit the type of customer that we all look for.
Okay.
And I'll get into that later on, but they do handyman, plumbing, obviously electrical, landscaping, and glass doctor. There's
right.
Even home cleaning now. So there's painting. So all the trades, basically all the licensed trades.
Yep.
Even unlicensed trades now too. They're starting to get into.
Because in the US, if I understand this correctly, the model's a little bit different in terms of licensing and registration than it is in Australia.
Yep.
Because in Australia, to do electrical work, you have to be, I know for plumbing, you have to be registered, which means you can work under a licensed person.
Yep.
You need to be licensed to be able to sign off work that's done by a registered person under your supervision. But in the US, they have the equivalent of a license, but they don't have, I don't think, registration to do that. So you can actually employ anyone to do work under your license. Have I got that right?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think they have 50 different laws. In every state, the laws are different.
They're all different, yeah, okay.
So, but I know generally, to hold a license, you can employ people.
Yep.
Where here we have to go through apprenticeships,
yes.
Then become licensed. And then once you got your license, you become, you can get your registered contractor's license.
Yep.
In the US, you can do an apprenticeship and you become a licensed electrician and work that way. That's under what they call the union work.
Right.
And then you have your non-union work, which is your general, residential, commercial maintenance, home builds and all that sort of thing.
And that's the space where Dwyer Group sits.
Yeah, okay. Pretty much. So what they do, you can still do an apprenticeship in certain states. Otherwise, you can walk in off the street as whatever and start operating under someone who has a license.
Okay.
But a lot of these guys train under a certain group, like a certain company, and they get their license. They become a journeyman tradesman, which is in the old thing like a B grade, I suppose. You've still got to work under a licensed contractor, for want of a better term. So, but it is completely different. The pay rates are different. Whereas tradesmen here are probably better paid than lawyers and accountants and all that sort of thing. In some of the states in the US, the electricians are on $10 to $15 an hour.
Okay, so it's a really low-paid occupation.
Yeah, construction work, and I don't know if you know Mike Rowe at all. Mike Rowe, he does Dirty Jobs. It's a TV show on Foxtel anyway, yeah. Mike Rowe's an advocate for getting, instead of kids in the US going to college and wasting their time, get them through a trade school, get them into a trade, because they've got a real shortage of tradesmen, and we're suffering here as well with the shortage of tradesmen.
We do, yeah. I actually had a conversation with someone on Twitter last night about it. We have a skill shortage not only in apprenticeships but across the board. On the horizon now.
Absolutely.
In this country.
Yeah, we have, and that enough about America, but we are suffering from that. And I've said to my kids, and I'll say it to anyone's kids, if university doesn't suit you, if you don't want to become a professional, I'll use in parentheses,
Yes.
If you don't want to become a professional person and go to university, then put yourself through a trade.
Yeah.
As we know, there's an article on one of those Today Tonights or whatever, and they were talking about Cubs cashed up bogans, which is what they're calling the tradesmen now, because the tradesmen are getting more than your professionals.
Interesting, isn't it? Because the standard default of the school system is to go through university.
Correct, yeah.
But there's two major problems if you don't know what you really want to do. One is it's costly.
Yep.
And you need parents or grandparents or someone really nice to pay for you, or you're going to run up a huge, what we call HEX debt.
Yep.
And you've got to repay that over time, right? The second thing that you lose, which I think is really often overlooked, is the time.
Yeah. You do.
You go 4, 6, 8 years, whatever your degree or double degree or this or that is, that's time that you're accumulating debt and you're not getting ahead.
Correct.
So all of a sudden you take huge debt, you take it forward 4, 6, 8 years, whatever it is,
Yep.
You're starting so far behind the 8 ball, whereas a tradesman actually gets paid to learn as they go through their journey.
Yep.
And sure, you don't start off with a lot, because I think, geez, what did I get in my first? I think it was like about $160 a week
Was it? Yeah.
I got when I first started. And I had to run around in a car and that. So there's not much left at the end of the week, But the point is that you're not going into debt and you're not wasting time. Now, obviously uni and those professional careers we need, and there's no doubt about that.
Yep,
but
absolutely.
to default to it, I think is very short-sighted in some ways. It's just my 2 cents on
Well, it doesn't suit everyone.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the point. Yeah, for sure.
And I learned that I went to university for 6 months and it didn't suit me. I was sitting in a classroom or sitting on a train, and on weekends I was out helping my father anyway. So, and speaking of that, I'm a little bit older than you, I think, but my first year's income was $92 a week as a first year apprentice. So,
what is the first you get now out of interest? Roughly. Depending, I know it's site dependent.
Yeah, it is site dependent. You'll get a lot more on a construction site than you will on working for a residential guy. Mm-hmm. Look, I think they're on $18 to $20 an hour or something like that.
Wow.
So I was looking after a site for a friend of mine recently. Just spent a couple of months looking after the electrical guys, and some of the first year apprentices were earning as much as the site managers. So,
that's unreal, isn't it?
When you got site allowance and height allowance and all that sort of thing that goes with it, it's it adds up. Travel, and it definitely adds up. So
going back to the Dwyer Group, they're trying to build brands around their ideal customer.
Yep.
So does that also translate into Australia as well?
Yeah, it does.
And who is that person?
So just before I get on that, one of the biggest things that I get when I speak to anybody about, whether it was with gyms or whether it was, my wife had an Avis franchise for 5 years, she ran as well.
Yep.
And so I've been around that franchising, the modelling for a long time. But the biggest thing I hear from people is, but it's different here.
Yeah.
It's not different here. That you run a business here the same as you run a business in the US, the same as you run a business in Russia, the same as you run a business. It doesn't matter where you are. A business is a business. They rely on customers.
Yep.
Right. So you just have to know your customer.
Yes.
One of the biggest problems a lot of the guys who come in to work for themselves do is that they don't know who their customer is.
Okay.
So that affects their advertising, because they do what we call shotgun advertising instead of using
Targeted.
a rifle targeted.
Yep.
So you waste a lot of money there. They don't know how to price properly, because they'll just ring 3 or 4 people on the sly and say, how much to get this done or how much to get that done, and Joe will be charging 70 and John will be charging 90. All right, I'll charge 80.
Yeah.
But they don't know why they're charging $80 an hour. That's how it goes. So again, that's a different story. But in answer to your question, who is that customer for us? So our customer, if you look at a pie, we only probably want 10% of that pie.
Yes.
We'll take anyone who comes in, but that 10% is the person who wants to basically have a relationship with their tradesman, because, as you know, being on the front line of any business, when you're out in people's homes, the perception of tradesmen is, A, you're going to get ripped off, B, they're going to be late, C, they're going to be untidy.
I was going to say, make a mess. Yeah,
make a mess. So you're dealing with you got to overcome this in the first couple of minutes of every visit that you go to in people's homes.
For sure.
So our customers are really, we used to call them, I don't know if you remember, Everybody Loves Raymond.
Yeah. I used to watch that show religiously. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we first started in this business, that was our customer, Deborah.
Okay.
So Ray's wife.
Yeah.
So she's sort of works part-time in a job. She works full-time with the kids. She's running around. She looks after the home. She's busier than we are generally as males.
Yes.
So that was our target customer, between 30 and 50 years old, or 55 years old, sort of middle to high income, and that type of semi-professional mother that basically runs the home. That was our ideal target customer. Over the years, that's actually changed a little bit now, and because of how the workforce is nowadays, with more people working from home, and there's a bit more flexibility in the work-life balance. Our customer has now changed a little bit to a guy probably our age. Or again, I'm a little bit older, but between sort of 35 and 55, professional, wants to work at home but doesn't want to do anything himself. We used to have to battle against the DIY guys. I tried to fix this, but it wasn't, so I reluctantly called you, but I want it done cheap. You know what I mean? A lot of these guys now, I don't want to know anything about it. Just go and fix that. Whatever it costs, just get it fixed. So that's sort of more towards where we're heading with our target market now. So, but that's not saying we'll work for Mrs. Jones, who's an 85-year-old woman, or we'll work for an 18-year-old guy who's just bought his first home or whatever it is. So, but generally our target market is based around that guy around our age who
those demographics.
Those demographics.
Well, I suppose the increase in real estate prices, which all homeowners have benefited from in Australia, has afforded people in some ways that luxury to spend more on their home and know that they're going to recoup it. In some cases several times over once they decide to upgrade or move on from that home. So it's not seen as so much wasted money anymore, but an investment in the quality of your home, which translates into a higher sale price. So the business at the moment, how many franchisees do you have, and in which locations, and give us a bit of a snapshot of the overall operation?
So we got 5 in and around Melbourne. We were up to about 9 in the Victorian side of things, and we had 3 in Queensland. What we found though, and I sort of touched on this before, was that there's a lot of guys who come in and want to do the right thing, come in full of gusto and this is what I'm going to do, enthusiasm, and then when they realise, I still have to work. I thought this was just going to happen for me. It's sort of, they start to lose a bit of faith, I suppose, in what they're doing. So, I mean, our job is to work with these guys to help them understand that, yes, if you want to achieve your dreams and goals and financial, dreams and goals, business and personal, you're going to have to work to do that. It's not. It's not like winning the lotto. That happens to the rare few. This is something that we all have to work at. And you've got to work at it. We'll work with you. We'll hold you accountable, so that you can achieve those things. But you're going to have to work. It's not handed to you on a silver platter. So, what we found is with the guys in Queensland, with the mining industry up there, there's a couple of those guys got offered jobs at ridiculous. And
they were ridiculous for a long time.
$250,000 to $300,000 a year. I mean, why would you come back and build a business when you can set yourself up in 2 or 3 years working in the mines?
For sure.
So, and I don't begrudge those guys for doing that. That's not a problem at all.
I've had employees do exactly the same thing. And it makes total sense, right?
Absolutely.
It's a moment in time that you can take advantage of. And like you said, 2 or 3 years there, and it's a huge sacrifice of your time and home life and a lot of those things. But if you can set your family up, pay off a house, buy a couple of houses, why not?
Wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you? Exactly,
I mean, if you can keep your lifestyle as it is and keep that money flowing, into, as you said, property or investments, whatever it is, set yourself up. Why wouldn't you? It's and that's, again, I don't begrudge those guys for doing that. That's how it goes.
Neither do I. It's actually smart.
And then we had some guys down here who just wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't market. Didn't want to spend money on marketing because I've never spent money on marketing. Why would I spend money on marketing? Well, you're targeting a different customer. So to do that, you need to find them. How do you find them? You've got to buy them.
Yeah.
Once you've got them, once you've bought them, then you've got to keep them.
Yes.
All right, so that's the guts of any business, finding and keeping the right customers. So,
Of course.
So we try and push that message, over and over and over. But some guys it works for, some guys it just doesn't.
Yep.
And we just had a guy after 5 years just hand back and do his own thing.
Okay.
He had some family things, but he was a fantastic franchisee and really good at it. And so so we've gone back from sort of 9 in here back to 5.
Yep.
And we've got them in Ballarat, Geelong, Werribee, Point Cook, sort of southwest area,
Yes.
northwest and central, and Melbourne East.
Okay.
So, and then we've got one guy in Newcastle now who's just started. So he's going, and we're sort of looking to get more in the Sydney area and Brisbane sort of over the next 12 months. We're not. And it is hard to sell trade-based franchises. The first 10 are the hardest, and everyone who's been involved in that around the world in different countries have told us that. Now, we've been doing this now for, we didn't sell franchises for the first couple of years because we had to build the system ourselves, get the manuals, the pricing guides and all that sort of thing in order.
Did that have to be altered from the US? It didn't sort of translate?
In some instances it did. We had to Australianise the language though.
Of course, yeah.
There's a few things that don't work over there.
Checks.
Well, there you go. Yeah, different. Yeah. Even the dates, like putting dates around the wrong way. So we had to go and develop our own software system. Or use a different software system, but as you know, we're now using I for Tradies, which is a developing system, and we're helping them develop that as well.
Yeah.
That suits us. So that's been a good thing. But the rest of the stuff, the manuals and the recruiting manuals, the marketing and all that sort of thing, we just had to Australianise it basically.
Okay.
The one thing we had to redo completely was our pricing manual.
Right.
We have what's called a menu pricing guide. And what that does, that takes away the doubt from a customer's point of view, especially if you're living in areas that are more affluent than affluent than others.
Plumbing all of a
Yeah, I
sudden.
know. But it takes away that doubt whether these guys have added a 10% BMW tax or not.
Right. Okay.
And there are a lot of tradesmen out there that'll in some areas that will up their pricing because of where they are.
So you got this pricing right, so that didn't happen.
Correct, yeah. And it basically puts the customers at ease. And as I said, the customer's perception is our reality. So if they perceive that they're going to get ripped off, well, unfortunately we've got to get over that somehow. And this is just another cog in the wheel that helps, us get over that perception that the customers have about tradesmen. So, so the pricing guide and what we do when we get to customers' homes is basically we had to just change that and Australianise that a little bit in the language that we use and how we actually price things.
Does the manual go into scripts and that sort of thing? Is that what you mean, like how you say things, or just the way you go about it?
No, so the manual would be, for example, it'll have 500 items in it, and it'll be wire in, supply and install a PowerPoint.
Yep.
On an inside wall. Wire in, supply and install a PowerPoint back to back with another. And
they'll have a price attached to that.
A price attached to it, yeah. So now those prices are based on an hourly rate and material content and a markup.
Yep.
And that's how every business
works. Yep.
You go into a restaurant, they don't have a breakdown of how much labour goes into making that steak for you. There's just a price with the steak.
Yep.
And if you want extras, there's a price down the bottom for the extras, your chips or well, hopefully you don't have to pay extra for your vegetables, but so there is just a price, and it's similar to that. It's just a menu. Now, whether you are a $1 million man, or whether you're a beggar off the streets, you still pay the same price.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's just how it goes.
So you standardise that across all your franchisees. So if someone rings up with an accurate description of the job, then you can tell them what the price is.
Yeah. So
like that.
We actually don't. We won't give a price out over the phone.
Okay.
Because inevitably it's going to be wrong.
Yes.
It doesn't matter. The customer will talk about adding switches. So we'll go out to someone's house, and and this has happened in the past with other businesses. We'll go out there, and it's going to cost you around this much, $300-400, and you get out there, and it's not switches they're talking about; it's PowerPoints, and it's you got to add safety switches and all this. So customers' description, it's not their fault. That's we part of what we do is educate our customers as well.
Of course, yeah.
Which is the biggest part of any business. You need to educate your customers. So the customer's not always right. You just need to educate them about what's what.
Yeah, I agree.
But so we actually always send someone out for a visit, And once we're there, we know exactly what's going on. We give them upfront pricing, and the customer can take it or leave it. And we don't want to knock off 15, 20% off our price, because that's a price we need to run our business.
Yeah.
And if the customer doesn't want to pay that, that's okay. We'll move on to the next customer.
Yeah. Okay.
And there are customers out there that just look for the cheapest price. And that's okay. That's fine. There are others who, as we said, our target customer want to build that relationship and just say, look, I'm going to call Jerome, my electrician, because I know that I'm going to get it done. He's not going to rip me off. The prices are standard, and away we go.
Yeah.
So that's how we go about that.
And that's ultimately in any business where you want to get to, right? Where you have a relationship and trust between yourself and your customers. Because if nothing else, it just makes everybody's life a little bit easier, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the other thing is too, you think about what it costs you to get a customer. Now, I know the number. I know it costs us between, and it depends on where you are in the country, and it's different in Ballarat than it would be in Williamstown here, or
Central Sydney or whatever.
Central Sydney's even worse. So it can cost you between $60 and $80 to get a new customer.
Yes.
Now, to keep a customer is about $6 to $8. Now that only means a phone call every now and then, or a thank you card, or a little letter saying, "Oh, we're having this special," just to keep in their mind. Top of mind awareness, we call it. So
yes.
So if you look at what you spend on your marketing, your return on investment from yellow pages or digital marketing or whatever, at best you're probably going to get $5 to $7 per dollar spent.
Yeah.
Maybe even more. Maybe 10 to 12, but that's probably what you're going to get per dollar spent.
Yes.
We work on a 10% margin. What I mean by that is, if we are turning over $1 million a year, we'll want to spend $100,000 on marketing.
Which is, I know a little bit about how trades market their businesses and that sort of thing, and that's pretty high.
It is, yeah, it is. But the more customers you have and the more customers you're able to keep, the less that becomes. So, if you're having to spend $100,000 to get new customers to get to that $1 million mark, and if you want to grow your business, you're going to have to spend money to find more customers. But once you get to a point where you're comfortable and you can reinvest into your current database, well, that might drop down to 5%, or it might drop down to 3%, or whatever it is that you want to do. It depends how comfortable you are. But, to spend $6 or $8 on your customers instead of 60 or 80, that extra $70 goes straight in your pocket.
Well, effectively, yeah. And that's one of the benefits of doing the work, the hard work, as you said early on, right?
Yeah, it is.
For lack of a better word, you can bank on that going forward in a way that actually everybody benefits. So
correct.
The people that come to you as franchisees, do you have a point you're trying to help them grow their business to? Is there commonality in where they want to end up? Because I'm assuming you're not trying to get to that 45 guys running around and big construction work. So where's that sort of sweet spot that you're helping people move to?
Yeah, so that's different for every person. Everyone has different business goals. Some people want to get to 15, 20 vans. Some people are happy to stay at 3 vans.
Yes.
In an area like Ballarat, for example, I don't think you could probably get to 15 or 20 vans in a 5-year period. I think that might take 20 or 30 years, and then you'd even struggle to fill the spot with 15 vans. So it's going to be different for every location, but ideally 5 to 7 vans is the sweet spot.
Okay.
Anything after that, you can run the business really effectively. Your net profit margins go up substantially. We've got some businesses around the world in the Mr. Electric system that are running 20 to 25 vans, and they're getting a 25% net profit margin.
Yeah, which is
so if you're turning over $3 or $4 million a year, it is. It is really high. I mean,
with that amount of employees and vans on the road,
correct.
when you're one man business, it's not as hard.
Absolutely.
But once you grow to that point, protecting those margins is the constant battle with any business, but particularly with a trade business.
Yeah, and that all comes back to pricing and weekly meetings and training and all that sort of thing to keep your employees or electricians or whatever you want to call them enthusiastic about what they're doing. Sharing the wealth with them as well. Like, we actually work on a base plus commission. So a base rate being whether it's an award rate or EBA rate, whatever it is.
For employees, we're talking about?
For employees, and that's not here. This is around the world. So the system is basically you get paid a fixed amount, and whatever you sell, you get a percentage of that.
Yep.
Now, some people don't like that because it encourages people to work hard.
Yes.
But these days you're not entitled to get everything. You have to earn everything, and that's another story. I could share with you my thoughts on how people think these days, but that's another.
Well, let's touch on it because it's funny because it's an essential part, right? Hard work, you can't get around it.
No.
So what's missing?
All right, so I'll give you a. My wife will hate me for this, but anyway, I went to my son's 6th grade graduation.
Okay.
A couple of years ago, and the principal gave his speech and started off really well, and then I got angry, and I told my kids to ignore what he said at the end of when we got home. But basically, what he said was, "You're all special. You're all winners. Everyone deserves to get whatever they're doing. They deserve to to become whatever they want to become." And I thought, no, nobody deserves anything.
Yeah,
you have to earn it. And if this is being drummed into them from a young age, whether it's from parents or from, I'm not blaming teachers for that. I'm using that as an example.
I understand, yeah.
Because I think teachers do a great job, by the way. But if it's drummed into them how good they are and that everyone's a winner, from the time they're young, they've sort of got nowhere to go, because they'll get out into the real world and they'll have a boss that gives them a bit of a talking to, and they come home all disgruntled and say, "Oh, this guy hates me," and if everyone's a winner, ultimately everyone's a loser as well. So you know what I mean? It's a challenge that we face daily, and I coach a local football side, and it's good to see those guys change from when they come up, being told from juniors that how good they are, and then they realise that, hang on, Johnny over here, he's a lot better than I am, but I've been told I'm as good as everybody. That's not how it goes.
Yeah. Well, it's that point where your skills, personally, being on the football field or in business, meet the marketplace, right?
Correct.
And sometimes they're not quite as you expect them to be in both ways.
Yep.
But unfortunately, we run our skills against the market, right?
Yeah.
And the market tells us exactly where we're at.
Yep.
So you better have some sort of understanding of how to deal with the feedback that you're getting.
Correct.
And be able to build on that and move forward if that's indeed what you want to do, which is not what everyone wants to do, and that's fine.
Yep.
But it's silly to think that you can't go through that process and get to the end goal, the dream or whatever, without the work in between, right?
Yeah, we're always told to, when I was growing up, you've got to work harder, Yeah. And I come through and said, no, I don't have to work harder, I just got to work smarter.
Yeah.
And then whether that was with football or whatever, I thought the same thing with coaches. No, I just got to work smarter. I've got to be, just smarter than the bloke next to me. Yeah. But, and this is what I respect about my dad a lot, is that the older I get, the smarter he was. So,
yeah.
You know what I mean? You do have to work harder.
Yes.
But you've also got to work smarter.
Yeah, you got to do both. Yeah,
you got to do both. You can't do one or the other. And you look at a guy like Tom Brady, who was taken last in the draft. I'm jumping around to different analogies here, but taken last in the draft when he came into the system in the NFL, he just worked harder and smarter than everybody else and become an absolute legend, even though they just lost the Super Bowl. But
he's he's done very well.
He's done very well. Yeah.
And just because you put in that work doesn't mean you win every time.
Correct.
Right? And that's a prime example of how that plays out. So what's the next 10 years look like for the Mr. Electric brand in Australia?
Yeah, so I'm lucky. I can very clearly picture how the business looks, and for us, Mr. Electric will get to a point where we will saturate the country, and we don't want to have 200 Mr. Electric franchisees running around, because that gives no room for growth for each one of these franchisees. So in 10 years' time, I'd like to see 50 Mr. Electric vans, 50 Mr. Electric businesses,
got it,
around the country, and be it from the smaller areas like Orange in New South Wales to Sydney to wherever it happens to be. Down in Hobart, we've got a guy who's interested down in Hobart at the moment. But so 50 Mr. Electric businesses, but we're also bringing out, and we'd like to speak to the Dwyer Group about this, about bringing out a few more concepts or brands
into Australia.
Into Australia, yeah. So the business will not just be Mr. Electric. We'll have a plumbing brand. We'll have a handyman brand. We're talking about glass and everything like that as well. But there's a few different concepts that they've got now that we'd like to bring out. and start here and use the same model. We've done the hard work about what works and what doesn't here over the last probably 5 years.
Yeah.
And just on a side note, when we first started, the now CEO of the Dwyer Group, a guy called Mike Bidwell, he actually said to me at a conference one day, he goes, "It'll be 10 years before you guys actually make this even work, a little bit."
Yeah.
And we're rolling into our 10th year now, and it's just starting to gain some wheels. So
yeah, right.
he'd been there. He started in a van. He'd seen different concepts start in different countries, and he knew exactly what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Of course, at the time I thought, what are you talking about, mate?
Yeah. It always takes longer than you think.
It is. So getting back to that question, so ideally I'd like to see probably 3 to 4 brands out here, Mr. Electric saturated around the country, and basically, our customer base being, made up of, all the Mr. Electric customers that we can then feed these other concepts into and co-brand and do all sorts of things.
Okay.
So that's how I see that. Hope that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Exciting times, right? There's a lot to real estate continues for whatever reason to get more expensive in Australia, and it's still the great Australian dream, and there's plenty of, all those houses need to be serviced at some time. So there's huge opportunity in the trade sector. And just to go back for 1 second, particularly for apprentices and those who realise the opportunity that we've got, because I think with this skill shortage that's coming, you go forward from today 5 or 10 years, within that 10 years we just spoke about, it's going to be seen as the marquee, the great job, right? To be a tradesman, because the opportunity will be there to have a great life and earn really good money within it. So
and just as you touched on before too, that university is right for some people, it's not right for others. So don't waste your time if you're not going to get anything out of it. And as you said, you've got to pay your HECS debts back. You've got to, you're spending between 4 and 8 years not earning. As an apprentice, you are earning, and when you come out of uni, or the guy's been a tradesman, that guy's probably could be $500,000 ahead of you to start off with.
Quite easily, yeah. And a 5+ year head start.
Yep.
Money compounds.
Absolutely.
As does skill and everything else. So outside of work, do you do anything outside of work? I know you said you coach footy, exercise-wise, diet-wise, that you feel allows you to do what you do here? Yep.
See, I do coach a local football side down in Geelong, the Lara Cats.
Yeah.
Anyone who wants a sponsor, please give me a call. But
to sponsor you guys, you mean?
Sponsor the club.
Sponsor the club, yeah.
Or you can sponsor me if you want. But no, to sponsor the club. No, we're always looking for, it's a community-based club. We're always looking for sponsorship and all that sort of thing. So, but we've had a couple of tough years, but we've got a really strong history with where we are, and we just want to get back to that. But my main thing, obviously outside that is work and football is my family. That's try and spend as much time as I can with those guys. My son and I. I've just moved from one gym to another, so my son can come with me because he's been at me about getting into the gym, and I'm sort of a little bit heavier than when I was playing football, so I'm happy to do that. So diet wise and all that sort of thing, there is a certain thing that I follow, but that's another thing altogether.
You don't want to touch on that quickly?
I read a book by a guy called Vinnie Tortorich.
Right.
It's called Fitness Confidential.
Okay.
He sort of half stole the name from Kitchen Confidential, which was a book by Anthony Bourdain. And he basically promotes a no sugar, no grain lifestyle. Mm-hmm. My unfortunate thing with that is I do like a beer every now and then. So, that's obviously beer is full of grains. So,
yes.
But, apart from that, it's basically just, eating real food.
Yeah.
I probably am a touch heavier than I should be, but I'm sort of working on that slowly. So
that came from a book. Are you a reader?
I am a reader. I not a great deal though. I've got a lot of friends who are right into the self-help books, and whether it be business books or whatever. But the problem is they spend most of their time reading. They never do anything about it.
You're kidding? No.
Yeah. So I find that more frustrating than anything. And friends who have got shelves full of self-help books, and they're sitting on the couch watching TV. So, And so
Comes back to the work thing, right?
It does. So look, I enjoy, I've read the Dan Brown books and all that sort of thing. The Fitness Confidential, as I said, I've read a book on George Negus wrote about the world of Islam.
Okay.
Just more so to get an idea of what's going on in and around the world.
Yeah,
not a bad book actually.
Yeah.
There's a book. What's his name from Virgin? Richard Branson.
Just got a new one out.
Screw it, let's do it. Yeah. So there's a few I'll read articles or I'll read bits and pieces now on social media, or if you find something that interests you, I'll flick through that. But I don't really waste a lot of time reading self-help books that don't interest me.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And so I know you love a podcast as well.
Yes.
So you're big on radio on demand.
Yeah. There's a guy I listen to quite a bit, Adam Carolla. So I've been listening to him since he started. Probably 8 years ago now, maybe longer. So I listen to him. I listen to the Rub, which is a Triple M.
Oh yeah.
I listen to those boys.
Easy way to get through the football without the ads. Yeah.
Well, it is absolutely. So, I do. I listen to podcasts more than I listen to the radio nowadays, and actually I've just started listening to yours as well. So,
that's the most important one out there. So
of course it is.
You want to make sure that you get right through every episode of those.
Yeah.
A question I ask everyone, Jerome.
Yep.
If you have one law change, you knew it was coming, what would it be?
Yes, I did. Now I personally reckon we're overgoverned when it comes to laws.
That's come up a bit, yeah.
Yep. I'm not sure if anyone else has said this because I've got through a few of the podcasts, but not yet. But I only saw this last week for the 100th time or something. It was Kerry Packer sitting in front of the House of Representatives back in the early to mid 90s talking about print media and the government's involvement in print media. And one of the things that he said was that if you want to introduce a new law, you need to get rid of an old one.
Yeah, that's come up before, yeah.
It has.
It's very smart.
Yeah, I think it is very smart. And, I think, if there was one that I had to do, it would be around, from our history, the construction laws around payments to contractors, from the primary contractor to the secondary contractor and then down the line. There needs to be some sort of structure around that, and there needs to be a body that can mediate quickly.
Yes.
I'd like to see 21-day payments from the primary to the secondary contractor, and then 14-day payments after that. At worst, I think if these big construction companies, have the money to do what they have done to others in the past, they've also got the money to spend on quantity surveyors that can work really quickly.
Yes.
And have the funds available within 21 days. I mean, that's 3 weeks from the time you submit your invoice to the time money goes out the door.
Considering a lot of these places are partly pre-sold.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, exactly. So, if you can do that, and then same thing down the line, there, from the secondary contractor down to the
right down to the employees,
to the employees, to the wholesalers, and all that sort of thing. Yeah. That has to be done ideally 7 days after that, but that gives you a month as a secondary contractor to work through your bills, invoices, and make sure that that's all in order. If you've got any issues, it gives you a month to get them solved with the guy down the line. And that's one thing I'd like to see a structured law around payment terms for construction.
There's always been a lot of noise in this space, hasn't there? Because there's a clear problem there.
Yeah.
And I'm not in it, so I don't understand both sides of the argument completely.
Yep.
But just the fact that this is such a common story, again and again and again, you hear the same thing from all these contractors.
Yeah.
It's somehow it's got to be cleaned up. Surely we can do it better.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Usually where there's smoke, there's fire. So,
yes.
If there's all this noise around it, there's something going on, and it needs to be solved.
You're actually the second person I've spoken to this week who has given me, if it's advice, that bit of advice that where there's smoke, there's fire, so you better get your ear to the ground and listen good. Is there now? How does someone find you, Jerome, Mr. Electric? Where's the best place to get in touch with you if someone wants to book a job, become a franchisee, sponsor the footy club? Where do they find you?
So first things first, with regard to booking a job, you can go onto our website, which is mrelectric.com.au.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
Pretty simple.
That'll take you through to any of the locations that you want to get to. If you're in Ballarat or Geelong or Melbourne, Newcastle, and hopefully coming Brisbane and Sydney.
Yeah.
So anyone who wants to book a job, you can book it through the internet. You can go to for Tradies as well, which where you can download the app and go through, and we're on there.
Yep.
You can call us on 1300 Mr. Electric, which is 1300 673 532.
Yep.
Or you can contact me personally at Jerome B at mrelectric.com.au.
Your email? Yep, perfect.
Which is just my email, yeah.
Is there anything you want to add before we wrap this up?
No, I just, from everyone's point of view here at Mr. Electric, we want to make sure that the electrical industry and the trade industry as such gets to a point where there's no, for want of a better term, grubby subbies out there. We want the whole trade industry to become professional. We get paid well enough, look after our customers. And the customer is the one that pays for all your holidays and whatever else. So look after your customers, be professional, be neat and tidy, and you'll do well.
Well, if everyone lifts their game just a little bit, we'll all benefit.
Absolutely.
A little bit, right? So,
yeah.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for having me in, and appreciate it.
No worries. Anytime.
Hey everybody, it's Matt again. Thanks for listening. Just a couple of things before you guys clock off. You can get all Trench Talk episodes at xrm.com.au/podcast. You can also sign up for other goodies at the same site. Just plonk your email in there and you are covered. That's X for X-ray, R for Romeo, M for Mike.com.au/podcast. If you really like what I'm bringing you, please head to iTunes, subscribe to this show and leave a review right there. And lastly, if you want to contact me directly, type the @ symbol followed by Mr. Matt Reynolds into your search bar and you'll find all the social links. Goodbye.